Should Christians be spanking their children? Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, my name is Eric. The goal of this channel is to bring biblical clarity to a controversial world. And today we're going to talk about one of the more controversial and taboo subjects that exist. And it's around the idea of disciplining and even more specifically, spanking our children. And depending on the generation you grew up in or are parenting in, this can mean very different things to different people. And so for me, I was raised as a kid in the 80s and early 90s. And obviously the view of punishment and spanking was very different then than it is today. And so our goal is not necessarily to speak into our personal experiences. Our goal is to bring biblical clarity. And so the question we ask is, does the Bible say anything about spanking? And if it does it have a good view of it as a form of correction, or does it forbid it? And so to answer the question, does the Bible talk about spanking being a good form of discipline? I would say the short answer to that is yes. I think there is enough biblical clarity about spanking specifically as a form of discipline, and the Bible affirming it as a tool in which can help parents bring correction. Now, we can ask other questions, and we'll get into that. Is it the best option? Is it the only option? And I think those are good, valid questions. So I think, as far as determining is spanking a good choice for you, I think it depends on the age of the child. I think it depends on the effectiveness of what the spanking can produce. I think it is determined by the parent's ability to be loving in the midst of correction and spanking. I think all of those things matter deeply. And so I think what would be helpful, we're going to bring biblical clarity to this. And so I think Proverbs is a really good place to start, because Proverbs is a book of wisdom. It's a book of instruction. It's really helpful, practical advice for life. And I want to read to you a few places where this has nothing to do with discipline or correction or parenting. But I want you to just understand where we look to Proverbs to give us wisdom in life, and how many of us, we take a lot of the wisdom from Proverbs and we apply it. So Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17, it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. I hear this used all the time, even outside of the church, outside of believers. Iron sharpens iron, right? So we take that proverb and we say, that's good wisdom. That's good advice. Okay. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And I think, again, man, that's good. Man, I should respond in humility and compassion. And I shouldn't just be going 100 miles an hour screaming, because, it brings about harsh words. They bring up anger in the other person. Okay, great. Good news. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 2 says, fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. So we read all these things and say, man, that's pretty good advice. That's solid. Like, I could use that and apply that to my life and I'd be better for it. So if Proverbs says things that are helpful, I think we've agreed it does, and if it says things about disciplining our children, I guess the question is, should we listen to that? If we agree on other parts, should we listen to other helpful things about disciplining children? So I'm going to read to you a few different places in the book of Proverbs that talk specifically about a parent disciplining their children. And we'll talk through what these mean. So Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24 says, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Okay? So it's going to use this word rod. We're going to see this multiple places in the book of proverb. So I want you to understand what it's speaking. Is it an actual rod? Like, is this going to your garage, finding something that resembles a rod? No. This is a shepherding term. Okay. This is used as a parent who is shepherding their sheep, their children, right? In the same way the Lord shepherds us, we shepherd our children. We guide, we direct, we correct. And so a rod is a shepherding tool, which I want you to imagine a shepherd for a moment, which is meant to correct. So a sheep is going off, like they're going astray. They're starting to leave your guidance. Now, a rod is a way in which you can, there's ways to use a rod. You can kind of use it and kind of just gently bring them back in. Sometimes they're being extra rebellious and defiant, or they're getting distracted. And what a shepherd doesn't do, they don't take that rod and just start wailing on the sheep, right? That's beating the sheep, right? That's not what this is speaking to. But to bring correction and to redirect them, they can give kind of a tap, a love tap. And it doesn't feel great, but it's also not like hurtful and harming the child long term. It is a tool to bring their attention back to the shepherd. And so these are, I call them love taps. Now, it doesn't mean that it feels good. It doesn't feel good. It's correcting them. But what Proverbs is saying here is if I spare the rod of discipline, it's equal to hating my child. I just want you to think about that for a second. If I don't bring correction through the rod of discipline, it's equal to hate. Now, that's strong language from Proverbs, but I think what is the driving force here is love. Because I love my child, because I want what's good for them, because I want them to grow up and have respect for authority and to love other people and be able to kind of have disagreements, but also in love, because I want all of these things for them, then that means that I have to be the one who models love through discipline, okay? Proverbs chapter 22, verse 15. It says folly, which another word is just like chaos, craziness, disobedience. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. Okay, here's what we know about children. Children are bound to do foolish things. Okay, this is in their nature, and adults do this too. But for a child, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. They're going to do things that are foolish just because they're immature. They don't know. They're going to also do things that are defiant and rebellious and need correction. Okay. So discerning what is what, I think, is really appropriate and helpful. But if we understand as a baseline, children do foolish things. And in order for us to help them, we need to correct them. And again, the rod of discipline will drive it far away. And again, I think the rod of discipline is a physical tool that is used by parents to bring correction that is different than just telling them. I think it is something that is more practical in the form of a physical correction. Okay, so we can call this spanking, I think, is the term that we would most use here. But in love, I think we should want to drive this foolishness out of them, to drive sin far away from them, because as they grow up, if they're under this environment where, hey, I can do whatever I want, I can say what I want, I can act as defiant, rebellious, demonic as I want, and guess what? There's not real consequences. You've seen the effect of that in adults you know now. Like, I can point out an undisciplined child that is now an adult. I can point them out in 2 seconds. They're entitled. They're selfish. They're just bratty adults. And I can usually tell, like, you weren't disciplined very much as a child. You got away with almost everything. Or maybe your discipline didn't really affect you that much. Maybe it was just timeout and you didn't really care so much about timeout. But the rod was probably spared, and therefore we see the byproduct of that in adults. One more example is Proverbs chapter 23, verse 13 and 14. The wisdom here is, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. I want you to hear that. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. It's almost getting ahead of this argument, right? Like, well, any form of correction that involves, physical correction, like you can't do it. It's out of bounds. It's wrong. What I would tell you is that if you're doing it in a godly way, again, there's a difference between godly discipline and whooping your kids and beating your kids and physically abusing your kids. Those are not the same things, okay? Spanking is different than a physical abuse if it's done in a godly way that is to bring correction. What Proverbs says is if you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Like, they're going to feel the effects of it, and it's going to be something that is going to get their attention. But if you're doing it in a godly way, this is not something that should cause any form of long-term physical harm. And obviously anything that involves, physical trauma that sends you to a doctor, a hospital, that is spanking and disciplining, what I would say is in an ungodly way. So unpopular take here, spanking, I think it is something that God does give us as a tool of discipline for parents to use in specific situations with their children. And we should take comfort knowing that this is the same thing that God does with us through his correction. He corrects us and he disciplines us in a way that does not feel good. If you're receiving true godly correction through his word, through godly counsel, through wisdom, it does not feel good. And we see this in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 6 through 11. We see how God disciplines his children. I want you to see how he does it and why he does it. So Hebrews chapter 12, starting in verse 6, it says, "My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son." So if you want to be a son or a daughter from God, here's what you get. You get his grace, you get his mercy, you get his love, and you also get his correction, which is in the form of rebuke. It's in the form of wise counsel. Again, like God is in spirit towards us. So physically, we don't experience the physical discipline of God, but we certainly experience it spiritually. We experience it in our mental state, in our emotions. He corrects the ones that he loves and that he calls sons and daughters. Verse 7 says, "Endure hardship as discipline." Okay, it's not physical, but when you go through hard things in life, many times we think that's the punishment of God. It could very much be the correction of God so that we would go a different way. It's not an angry father who wants to just lay into us. It's a loving father who sees, if you keep doing this, if you keep going this way, man, it's going to deeply impact and affect your life, and it's going to hurt you. And so endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? Again, this is a rhetorical question. Godly parents bring godly discipline. We do not let our kids walk over us. We do not let our kids run our house. We do not let their emotions and their feelings drive how we live life and how we parent. There's a way in which we discipline. Verse 8, "If you are not disciplined and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it." Discipline, correction, spanking should bring about respect. Okay, this isn't an authoritarian, abusive respect, but it is, I have been charged to shepherd you, to guide you, to love you. So therefore, my correction should bring respect. Continuing, "How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live?" That's God. "They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness." Verse 11, I want you to hear this. "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it." Okay? Now, what can we take away from this? God loves us. We see this in the cross. We see Jesus dying on the cross for our redemption. That's love. And then we see when we come into sonship or become a daughter of God, we endure discipline because he loves us. Because discipline's main job and goal is to get us back on track. It's to convict us. It's to lead us into righteousness, which is right living. And so the same should be true of how we discipline our kids. It should be from the same place of motive. So I want to give you, just in closing, a few ground rules for spanking. Okay. I want to tell you what it is and what it isn't. Okay. I think some helpful tools is our kids should know ahead of time. They should know what behaviors of theirs are going to produce a spanking versus a different form of discipline. So different forms of discipline, you can take tablets away, electronic away, you can take friends away, you can take certain privileges away. Those are all for timeout. Those are all different forms of discipline. And I'm not saying spanking is the only one, but they should know, hey, if you do this, here's what this consequence is going to be. So you don't have to detail everything. Like, hey, if you talk back to your mom one time, it's going to result in 35 minutes of timeout. I don't think it needs to be that specific for everything, but they should know the 1, 2, 3, whatever number of things. If you do this, it will result in a spanking. And I'm going to spank you because a true loving father will discipline their child because they love him, right? So I think our children should know. Don't just wait for a bad day and snap on them and start spanking them for anything and all things, right? Have clear lines that you've established with them and with your spouse if you're married. This will result in a spanking. I think that's helpful advice. Number 2, when we spank, we always do it from a place of love. So if we need to take a break because I'm angry, I'm heated, and the way in which I'm about to spank you is not going to be in love, I think we as the parent need to dismiss ourselves from the situation. We need to pray. We need to talk to our spouse. We need to talk to God. And we need to get to a place of a spirit of love before we spank. We don't just lash out in anger and start just finding anything and everything that we can spank, okay? So we need to come from a place of love. Now, this is difficult, but I think it's very necessary. Number 3, after we spank them, I think it's always important to explain to our child why they were spanked. Even better, I think we should ask them, why did you just receive that form of discipline? And I want to hear from them why. And I want them to be able to articulate to me why that happened, if they're of age to be able to do that, or we lovingly explain to them if they can't verbalize back to us. We say, hey, here's why you received a spanking. Here's why you received this form of discipline, so that they can clearly understand that this will not be tolerated and this will result in a spanking in the future. And then I would remind them of all of the verses that we just went through. And the reason that you're doing this, I don't hate you as a person. I'm not angry with you as a person. I'm angry with you by the behavior you just exhibited, by the action that you just had. That caused me to be frustrated and angry, and therefore discipline you for that action, right? This isn't who you are as a person. This is something that you did. And my job is to help drive you away from sin so that you can lead a productive, godly life. So telling them beforehand, this is why this happened, having them tell you why it happened after they receive the discipline, and then reminding them that you're doing this from a place of love. Now, again, we're talking about spanking because this is the taboo one. And I know it gets into some gray area because you may live in a state that may legally say that this is child abuse. Any form of spanking at all, that it's illegal, it's something you shouldn't do. And I would tell you to use good, godly, biblical wisdom. If you live in one of these states, leave. No, I'm just kidding. If you live in one of these states, I would obey these laws for the sake of not losing my children. Okay, I wouldn't just go to every extent and say, well, the heck with that, and then lose your children, or they go to protective custody, because at the end of the day, what's better? I would find the best form of discipline if that applies to you, but many people, that is not your situation. So I think that spanking is a biblical form of discipline, and I would encourage you to use it in the place of defiance, rebellion, right? In just deep areas of sin in a child. I think according to their age and what you've established in your home. But also, I want to be clear, it isn't the only form of discipline. Maybe you were raised in a home, everything was a whooping, a spanking, man. You just got hit for everything, right? I think that's also a different and more abusive way to view sparing the rod. I think there are many other helpful tools depending on the kid. How do they respond, right? Some kids, spanking will get their attention very quickly. Other kids, they're just mutants and it doesn't do anything. So for them, if you take their tablet away for a day or 3 days or a week, man, this is going to have a drastic impact on their behavior. Okay, that might be a better, more helpful tool for you. Maybe for you, it's timeouts. Maybe it's loss of friends. You got to find what works for you for the age that your kid is in. But I think all of them working together can produce a respectful, honoring, godly child. And so, do you have a different form of discipline that's worked for you? I'd love to hear it in the comments. Is there something maybe you could add to help parents find different forms, different ways? I'd love to hear from you. But our goal is to bring biblical clarity to a controversial world. And because this may be controversial to people who do not believe in a biblical form of discipline and correction, again, that's not what we're after. We're trying to equip and train Christians to have biblical clarity. I think the Bible is clear on this, and I think we can raise godly children in the way that God gave us as parents. So we love you. Thank you for joining us today. Cannot wait to see you back here next week.